Hey everyone, this is Dave from Dave the SEO and Co here. This is my talk from Brighton SEO, and for some reason the masterclasses they decided not to record, unlike the other sessions. So I'm recording a version for you. For anyone who couldn't make it along, anyone who couldn't find meeting room 15, which was very well hidden within the Brighton Centre, and anyone who just couldn't make it along to Brighton SEO. So this is approximately a 70-minute talk. Obviously, in the live version, have an opportunity for some questions and answers as well. But if you have questions for me, do feel free to get in touch, and I'd be very happy to discuss everything further. Originally, this was a longer deck with a little bit more information in it. So if there's something I don't cover which you wish I had, then do let me know, and I might have some slides somewhere that I can get across to you. So I am Dave, and I run Dave the SEO and Co. So I mainly do consultancy with companies, lots of auditing, lots of strategy consultancy as part of that, as well as working with some clients on a fractional basis, which is basically a part-time job with them. And I've been working now in SEO for just coming up for 21 years. So I've been doing it for a while, and I've done a lot of strategies, and I'm going to pass on what I've learned, because when I first worked in a role where I needed to come up with an SEO strategy and my bosses were asking me to put SEO strategies together, I found I didn't really know what I was doing, and they didn't really know how to do an SEO strategy either, and no one else seemed to really know how to put together an SEO strategy. So there's clearly a problem there, and now I managed to work it out. It took a little while, not saying I worked it out straight away, and different people will have slightly different opinions on some of these areas, but this is what I find works, so I'm going to try and tell you everything, so you don't have to kind of go through that process for yourselves. So here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to cover what is a strategy, not just what's an SEO strategy, what's a business strategy, what's a marketing strategy. We're going to go over the initial information gathering stage you'll need, who you need to build relationships with to get that information, and then later on to get the buy-in you need and get work progressed. The different strategy considerations you're going to need to think about, which we can think about in terms of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. That's quite a good way to present it back to people as well, what you've gone through. Then how to actually put that final strategy together, get it presented, get it signed off. And lastly, and definitely not least, making your strategy actually happen, making sure your strategy doesn't just become a strategy document that no one ever looks at and never actually gets implemented. So let's start off with what is a strategy. So best way to put it, at least for a business strategy, is very much a plan to gain or maintain a competitive advantage. So that could also be applied to other types of strategy in life in general as well. So it's not just a set of objectives. Objectives are part of a strategy, but objectives on their own, that isn't what a strategy is. Nor is it a series of tactics. And often when I see people trying to do an SEO strategy who don't quite know what it is, what they end up doing is a series of tactics which may come just from what they've done before for other clients, may come from competitors copying what they do. You obviously will have a series of tactics as an output of your strategy, but a tactics on its own, not a strategy. You may end up with a plan put into a roadmap, nice and neat, nicely color-coded. On its own, that again is not a strategy. And you may work out what that competitive advantage is going to be, but if you don't have the plan to get there, that's no good. So competitive advantage on its own is not a strategy. So what's a good strategy now? So we've established what a strategy is, but there's good and bad strategies. So how do we make sure we've got a good strategy? So we need to make sure that the competitive advantage or advantages we come up with, which is likely to be a mixture of things, adds enough value for our users. Often it will be our end users, which will often be the people actually buying from us. But as we're going to see, in some cases, we are actually concerned about other users along the way. And they have to be users who offer value to the actual business. So let's have a look at a silly example. But let's imagine Chanel suddenly decided that their website's going to start accepting checks. Is it a competitive advantage? I mean, their competitors don't do that, at least not through their websites. But does it add value to their users? Almost nobody uses checks now anywhere in the world. So very unlikely that that's going to add any value to enough people, certainly. So what if they offer cash on delivery instead? A lot of people in the world do use cash on delivery. A lot of markets where cash on delivery is a very important way of paying for a lot of people. So there's definitely are people who want cash on delivery, but they aren't the people who are going to buy from Chanel. The people who are going to buy from Chanel almost certainly do have credit cards. Now, if we're at Amazon India, on the other hand, then we are going to, if we add cash on delivery, it's going to add a lot more value for people who are of value to us. And in fact, Amazon India do offer cash on delivery, though they don't use this banner that I mocked up. Thank goodness. So one thing to consider is your competitive advantage is probably lots of different things that make that up. It's unlikely to be one thing. In some cases, your business strategy, your competitive advantage will focus on one main thing. So let's take Waitrose as an example. They have a number of factors combined into one value proposition. Now, if anyone's not from the UK, Waitrose is a supermarket, upmarket supermarket, which is a national brand. And so they do things like they make sure the shopping experience is great. A lot of people would say that shopping in Waitrose is a more pleasant experience than shopping elsewhere. Great brand value and affinity, so a lot of people will see Waitrose TV ads and other advertisements and will have affinity with the brand they see portrayed. Locations are often going to be more in city centres, more likely to be in more affluent areas where their target audience actually live. Their pricing and offers, so you might think, if you do know Waitrose, that pricing is not that important to them because they're quite expensive, but actually, they still have to seem like good value for money. And people would argue who shop there that yes, it's more expensive, but you get a better quality product, so it has to be still fair pricing. And they use offers to make it seem like people are getting a good deal, even with the offers, a lot of the time it's still very expensive. And then of course there's free coffee. So Waitrose loyalty card owners used to be able to get free coffee at Waitrose. Waitrose decided to remove that because they decided it wasn't really of enough value to the type of people who were valuable to their business. They decided that their kind of key demographics weren't that interested in free coffee. Then we had lockdown, and we had also cost of living crisis, and suddenly actually a lot of people will benefit from free coffee, or will at least see it as a good reason to go and shop and spend a little bit more at Waitrose rather than elsewhere. So they brought it back, and it seems to have been successful. But all of those things together in that value proposition need to give you sufficient value for customers to turn them into customers, or make them spend more often perhaps, to keep them as customers, or do something else or value to your business. So it might be a mixture of those different things. And it's got to help you, whatever that thing is that you want them to do, it's got to help you achieve your basic business objectives, which is going to be the same for pretty much any business. So it could be increasing sales, increasing shareholder dividends, maybe growing market share, increasing profit, or increasing the company's value or the share value. And basically, it always comes down to those few things. Whatever you kind of say the strategy is, the objectives are, that's what the business is trying to achieve, and the SEO strategy should be helping the business achieve these things at the end of the day. But at the same time, it has to be achievable within a short enough amount of time. So the timelines going to be for that. Otherwise, the business runs out of money. For example, within the available resource or effort, a business is always going to have a finite amount of money or finance available. We need to think about other constraints like legal, political, ethical constraints as well, of course. And you need to do it for the minimum available budget. So if that doesn't mean you choose the strategy that's going to cost the least money to implement, you work out what the strategy is and what you want to achieve, and then work out the cheapest way to do that, so not wasting money. And it has to be a competitive advantage that is sustainable in the long term. And what long term means will vary. So if you are getting a whole new website as part of your strategy, you're going to build a whole new website, and that's going to give you a competitive advantage. Then you need to make sure that that's going to give you a competitive advantage for long enough to recoup the costs and make it worthwhile. Otherwise, if your competitors suddenly also get brand new websites, then perhaps it's not going to be not going to work. So far we've mainly talked about business strategies. It's a bit more general, but really we're talking about business strategies, and business strategies are focused on value proposition. Marketing strategies, in contrast, are focused on value communication. So in other words, business strategy is about creating a better offer, and marketing strategy is about making the same offer, making the offer seem better. And therefore, if you've got a great business strategy, you still need to support that at least an okay marketing strategy to make people find out what your business, what your offering is. And likewise, with a marketing strategy, you could have a great marketing strategy, and that can actually make a success of what's actually only an okay business strategy. There's lots of companies and brands out there who really their competitive advantage is their brand, or it's the way they're kind of marketed. So Cocoa Pops, pretty much exactly the same as lots of other chocolate kind of crispy cereals, but everyone loves a cartoon monkey, so that can make the difference. So now we go on to what is an SEO strategy. So obviously we're trying to find that competitive advantage via search competitors, and if you've listened to some of the talks today, you're going to realize that everyone thinks that their competitive advantage is going to be AI, which means everyone ends up back in the same place. Probably not sustainable as a competitive advantage using AI. So then we need to work out for SEO, therefore, who are our users or our end users who are offering that value proposition, that competitive advantage to. So we've got three main users we need to think about, and not all of them are necessarily people who are buying from us or from our business. So search engines, we need to think of as a user, and we need to have a strategy for them. They want to show the best content for every single search, and they're not too bothered what type of result that is. It's the best result for users, so users keep on coming back and using their search engine and not a different search engine. So we need to give them a better value proposition than our competitors for why they should show us higher in the results, in other words, or within features like AI overviews. And then we also need to think about if somebody is coming to our site to buy something, whether they are buying immediately, or whether they are going to become a lead, or whether they're going to then go to a store. We're probably going to think about them as our end user. So our initial value proposition to them is going to be why they should click on our result rather than a competitor's result. So within the SERPs, within the search engine results pages, So how do we boost click-through rate? And then once we get them onto the page, how are we going to boost engagement by making sure that the content's right for them and match intent at the end of the day. So once we have people on the site, then obviously SEO at the end of the day is a marketing channel. So once we have people on the site, we can communicate to them the value of what it is we want to sell. Now, of course, it might be they're already looking to buy something. They come onto a product page, which makes that easier. But it could also be they come onto a content page and we then using that as an opportunity to think of it as a marketing channel to make them aware of our company, our offering. However, of course, there's lots of websites out there that don't sell anything, at least not to their users. What they're actually selling is the users, is the visitors. So if you're selling, advertising space, or you're selling, data collection and so on, to Adam the ad man here, then that's your end user, and then you have to think about the value proposition for them as well. The value proposition is basically who the website users are and how many of them there are at the end of the day. So still engage those users, we still have that value proposition to the actual website users, why they click, why they engage, so that we've then got the traffic to put another value proposition together for Adam the ad man here. So it might seem kind of early on within this 70-minute talk, but this means we're going to go through what SEO strategy boils down to now before we go into a bit more detail. So it really comes down to finding competitive advantages that will make the firstly we need to make the value proposition of our pages better for search engine than competitors are. So that's the first thing we're going to do. And so in some ways you can think of that as a strategy on its own of how we achieve that. Secondly, we need to make the value proposition for clicking on a link and then engaging with the content better than that of competitors. And so in some ways that's a strategy of its own, and a value proposition of its own. And then thirdly, is usually going to be doing a better job of communicating to site visitors what the business's value is, so they're more likely to become buyers, basically. So we're thinking of it at this point as a marketing channel. But of course, it could also be, as we've been discussing, to make the value proposition to advertisers by having the right visitors, and that might be part of our strategy. So now we know what a strategy is and the basic parts of it. We need to work out what exactly our strategy is going to be, and to do that we need to make sure we know what's going on, where we are, and get a lot of different information. And the first step to get that information is to work out who has that information, and we're also going to need to know who our stakeholders are, all the way through putting our strategy together and then making it happen. So who are our primary stakeholders? So may well be the CEO or the MD, depends a little bit on the size of the company, just how important they're going to be. You'd like them to have some knowledge of SEO and how amazing it is and where it's going to fit into the marketing strategy though. Then we've got our C-suite, our directors, our department heads. Likely they're going to be particularly important, but especially the CMO, the head of marketing, head of digital, somebody like that. And then, of course, there's the people actually who are going to be doing the work, or who are already doing the work. SEOs, copywriters, content writers, website managers, probably developers as well. And we also need to identify who it is that actually is going to sign off on our plans and any budget we need. And that may well be someone like a CFO, but it could also be the CEO or the MD in a lot of cases, or somebody else. And then if we were in an agency, we also need to work out who the gatekeeper is, who's the client contact, and are they planning to work as a gatekeeper and try and control the relationships we would like to have with all the other people, or are they going to actually help and facilitate, and we need to build the right relationship to make sure that happens. There's some other stakeholders we need to think about as well. So Secondary stakeholders are going to include devs if they're not in there already, user experience, another one could be a primary one. Definitely legal and compliance. We need, ideally to be talking to them directly. So when we're saying something super urgent, they can come back and ask us why. Otherwise, legal and compliance can really derail SEO efforts, unfortunately. And then we also need to know who the other digital marketers are. People working in social, people working in paid, particularly paid search, and we're going to talk a lot about how we integrate our SEO strategy with a wider digital marketing and paid search strategy a bit later on. So we need to build the right relationship. So you will need to know what it is that you want to get out of this. So then you can go in, and not waste people's time. And then you want to ideally try and build as real life a relationship as possible. This might take a little while, but ideally you're going into offices, you're going and seeing other departments, maybe even visiting other offices that you wouldn't normally work in to meet the right people, trying to organize in-person meetings when you can. Make sure you ask intelligent questions, and this may seem obvious, but it's about understanding what people do, understanding the language they talk in, understanding what questions are going to be easier for them to answer. Be ready to discuss different opinions, of course. Don't be too set on your opinion. SEO is all about compromise, of course. We don't get anything done if we don't compromise. And it's important to know the drivers of the different people you're going to build relationships with. So, possible drivers they might have. It might be that they're interested in recognition, they want pay rises or promotions, things like that. It could be what's important to them. So how can we help them there? Is it that they just want to improve efficiency, either for themselves, for their teams, for the company as a whole? Do they want to improve their knowledge, get experience of something new? Maybe they just fancy doing something a little bit different in their jobs, or maybe they're looking to change jobs at some point in the future, and they want to make themselves more valuable to potential employers. At the same time, it could be that they're actually just after less work and they're after an easy life, and it's really important we understand what the drivers are, because if we go to somebody who really wants the opportunity to do some SEO, they haven't done it before, they're excited to learn something new, and we say don't worry about this, we're just going to take this all off you, just leave it to us, then you're going to upset them. Whereas if you go to somebody who really doesn't want any extra work, wants to do the minimum work that they can, and that's different to efficiency, because efficiency is being able to achieve more with the same time and resource. But people who just want to do as little as possible, you're going to get much further if you say to them something like, okay, well, next time you've got some new products to put on the site and work on, let us know and we'll do the page titles and meta descriptions for you. We'll take that off your plate. So it's important to understand what those drivers are. And we want to think about whether we can make people look good at the end of the day. Make our requests simple, and in some cases using more technical language that's their language is going to make it simpler than just doing it in our language or in SEO language. Make people's lives easier. Try and predict what their objections are going to be in advance, so you can have the answers ready. And at the end of the day, really important to try and minimize risk and uncertainty for people. Like SEO is this big, scary black box. They don't really understand what goes on in it. One way is to train them and educate them. But why is it that we're going to make a success of SEO when maybe they've heard of people, horror stories of people losing visibility and so on. Think about how SEO is seen in your company. Maybe SEO is siloed, it's seen as standalone. Everyone else ignores it a little bit, and maybe that's because people don't understand what it is so good at. Maybe quick results are expected, and that's not what SEO is generally very good at. It's not impossible, but that's not really what it's very good at, and so that might need to be changed. Or maybe it's seen as too long term, and so nobody really wants to invest as much in SEO because they're like, well, we're not going to get any results for a couple of years if we start doing that. So you want to get that balance of what you can do in the long term and the short term, but also manage expectations. Where does content sit? Ideally, you've got an organic team with SEO and content sat together, and likewise user experience are within that team as well, or working very closely. If that's not the case, you might have to make that happen. Is SEO seen as an alternative to paid search? Because that's not really what it is. If it's just seen as an alternative rather than something that can complement it, then it's probably going to be undervalued, and it's going to maybe be measured on the wrong key performance indicators, KPIs. And maybe you're going to have the wrong attribution model as well, which we're going to talk about a bit more in a minute. And also think about, brand awareness, engagement, these kind of metrics that SEO is very strong on. If those aren't valued within the business, then that's going to make SEO look less valuable than it really is. But of course, we, at the end of the day, are building an SEO strategy that's going to help the business and help it achieve the business strategy, the overarching strategy, assuming there is one. So is there one definitive strategy that we can see and understand? And ideally it's written down somewhere, not just in the CEO's head. If it's not written down, or even if it is, different stakeholders may have a different interpretation of what that strategy is. That's important to understand how different people see it. Maybe they've got a different focus. Maybe they've got different objectives. So let's think about whether we're focusing on growth or profit. Some companies want both, of course, but maybe there's focus on one more than the other, depending on exactly where the company is and what timelines are there. Startups were maybe going to be expected to start achieving things a lot more quickly. More established companies maybe are more likely to be able to kind of wait for results. Is there a clear marketing strategy that we can see, and we can work out where SEO is expected to perform and where we think it actually can? And what is the value communication of marketing strategy focused on? It might differ. The value proposition might differ. The value communication might differ depending on who the users are. So obviously we talked about the three types of user, but the reality is we also need to break that down further, particularly for our end users, into different personas, different demographics. So maybe the company already have these. Maybe there's something already that we can look at and use. And we need to think about who the current buyers and users are. But maybe there's some gaps. Maybe there's some opportunities to bring in new types of customers, and maybe competitors have different end users, different customers, and maybe there's some opportunities there to go after them. It's very useful if we can identify users by search behavior. The more long tail the search terms are, the more likely it is that there's something in there that will give us an indication of who it is that's searching for those terms. More complex problem terms, for example, might give away who it is that has a problem, why they want to solve that problem. At the very least, I'd expect that we can identify which search terms are more likely to be from businesses and which are more likely to be from individuals. The brand behind the business is worth understanding. So think about, how is that brand seen? Is it a well-known brand? Do people have any particular feelings towards it? Is there an associated value proposition that people just know about straight away when they see that brand, which we don't necessarily want to go against? And why do customers buy from this brand, and why do they keep on buying from this brand? So the brand itself could be a sustainable competitive advantage. And if we're doing an SEO strategy for that kind of business, we want to lean into that. So if we were doing SEO for Dell, we lean into the fact that it's seen as reliable, high quality, good value. If we're doing SEO for Volvo, first thing you think of with Volvo is safety. So lean into that and maybe quality. Heinz is a great brand in that everyone knows it's of a certain quality. It's not the best, it's not premium, it's not cheap. You know, if you go into a supermarket and they sold out of Hellmann's mayonnaise, then there's a very good chance that you're going to buy Heinz mayonnaise, even if you've never tried it before, but because of the brand, you know it's going to be reasonable quality, right? And then WebMD, that'd be a nice one to do SEO for, because Google absolutely love them, as do individuals, and trust them to give good health advice. So is there one or are there multiple value communications? Maybe there's different ones for different end users, so important to understand. And then, yeah, what above the line activity is planned, so things like TV ads, out of home, print, and so on. Maybe pricing and value for money are the main competitive advantage, and sometimes companies who focus on that don't actually do that much above the line advertising. But things can vary by market, and that includes what the competitive advantage is going to be, what the value proposition is, and definitely how the brand is seen and how it is marketed. Now, let's take an example of Sephora. So these are the first 4 videos on Instagram for Sephora in 4 different regions, so 4 different accounts. And as we can see, there's a slightly different approach for each of these. Can anyone take a guess what any of these are? Some of them have got more tutorials, some of them are more user-generated content. Yeah, so I'll give you a second to think about it. You'll just have to tell yourselves whether you got the answers right or not. Yeah, so we've got Brazil, we've got Europe, we've got North America, and we've got the Middle East. So, you know, the Sephora brand is a very strong kind of global brand, but slightly different approach in each market. So we need to be aware of what's being done in other channels. Okay, and overall, we need to be aware of what the marketing strategy is and how SEO can fit into that. Is there an SEO shaped hole? It could be that SEO is already being included in the marketing strategy, and they know exactly what it is and isn't good at. But it's also a good chance that there's stuff that it just isn't being done by any channels within the marketing strategy or the digital marketing strategy, which is what SEO is going to do well. And also thinking about where SEO can support with other activities and be more integrated. Now, of course, we want to integrate paid and organic search, and this just doesn't happen enough, to be honest with ourselves. But we really, can get a lot of value by breaking down silos that exist between these departments. And one great way to do that is to have shared KPIs, key performance indicators. So we could use things like total search conversions, total search assists. And so rather than competing for results, if at least targets are based on this, we don't have a situation where paid and organic want to keep data to themselves, where they end up cannibalizing each other and trying to steal each other's leads to try and reach their targets. That doesn't mean we're not going to look as well at data that's specific to individual channels, but if we get people to have their targets based on working together, that can really help and improve, of course, information and data sharing. So if paid search see, okay, we've been testing headlines, this headline's really got a great click-through rate, maybe that's something that can be used when putting page titles together. Or the organic team can be, we used to have this page ranking, we used to have a product listing page ranking for a long time for this keyword. And now Google have suddenly decided they want to show a product detail page instead. So we think the intent is changing behind that search term. You're bidding on some similar search terms in paid, so you might want to test having different landing pages. But of course we need to have a fair attribution model, because we are still going to be looking on a channel by channel level, as well as potentially having those total search KPIs. Now originally I was going to go through a lot of slides on different attribution models. I decided to cut it down. Part of the reason for that is because of time. Part of the reason is also because nowadays you can use some very good technology which is intelligent and will take all sorts of different data to work out kind of fair attribution. So these kind of older, kind of simpler models don't get used as much. They still get used, and so if you're using first click, don't. It benefits organic, but it's not really a fair for other channels. Last click benefits paid, benefits affiliate. The best one of these, probably, if you have to pick one, is the U-shaped attribution model. So the first and last clicks are the most important, but there's still some value for the ones in the middle. And it will often be that several of these different clicks are going to be from organic, and so organic often will look better in a fair way, but it will look better as a result of using something like this. So once we've got paid and organic working in harmony together, we can divide and conquer and work out where we put each keyword. So which keywords can SEO actually cover? We've got to be honest with ourselves at this point. What are we going to cover in the short term, and what are we able to cover long term, but we maybe need some help from paid while we're busy optimizing? And which keywords with low conversion rate are going to be better suited to organic, particularly if they've got high search volume, but also which keywords maybe have a higher conversion rate but low search volume. And if there's 10 searches a month but there's a 25% conversion rate, that's ideal for paid to go after and probably not worth organic optimizing for. But of course there's going to be some really important keywords where you want to have both channels showing. Okay, and then next up we need to integrate SEO content and also maybe user experience or conversion rate optimization, however that might be within the business, if it exists within the business. Now ideally everyone's already working together under organic and everything's all tickety-boo, but at the end of the day sometimes content can be separate, but content obviously isn't just for SEO, but at the same time SEO can't exist without content, and non-SEO content being just created for other channels is a bit of a waste of an opportunity. By taking this under an organic umbrella, we can make sure the value communication on the pages, once we get people there and engaged, is also going to benefit other channels who use the same pages, such as social and so on. So ideally we have a combined strategy, and maybe this masterclass should be called Organic Strategy or SEO and Content Strategy. And of course then we're going to make sure that the targets and the KPIs used are combined as well. We may also want to work very closely with PR, who can do a great job of getting us links and helping us surface content. So we might want to do some training with our PR teams if they exist. Make sure they understand what the value of links is. Also just the basics of how SEO works. Which URLs should they mention? So don't just put the homepage in press releases and so on. When they should speak to SEO about what they're working on, what opportunities have come along, to find out, could you create this? What do you think of this idea? And make sure they understand the value of hero content. And it might be them creating that content, and it's making sure they understand the value of it for SEO and that they can work with us on that. But also maybe we're creating hero content and making sure they understand what they can do from their side with that. And while we've mainly focused on getting people onto a website and getting them to then interact with our brand, we can also use SEO to get people seeing the brand within the search engine results pages. You know, if we really are seeing kind of 64% of searches with 0 clicks now, then we need to look at marketing within the SERPs, which of course doesn't work if you are the kind of company who's selling your users. But if you're selling a product, a service, a brand, and brand awareness is important, then you can do that here. So in this example, people are searching for best holidays for water sports, and within these AI overviews, you've got Club Med, Le Boat, have got visibility for their brands here. Mark Warner are mentioned under the Mediterranean as well. So you can optimize for these to try and get your brand mentioned, try and build awareness through these. And I think that's an increasingly important part of strategy, and just making sure that we're building brand recognition in the SERPs in general. So clear page titles, thinking about what images are potentially going to show for your brand, getting your logo in there potentially, pushing yourself into AIOs as I mentioned, and then also checking knowledge graph if it exists, checking your Wikipedia page if it exists is up to date. And we also need to know where we are. So before we actually start on the strategy properly, we need to know where we are. We need to benchmark. We need to think about what competitive advantages we already have. Are they the right ones? But also think about what competitive advantages we used to have as a business, and it might be before we started or before we became the agency. Maybe the company used to have fantastic rankings for some reason which has gone away. So what was that? Is that possible to regain? And just in general, is SEO fit for purpose right now? Is the team fit for purpose? Is there even a team? Are there gaps in the team? Are there people who need extra training? Maybe is the site fit for purpose? From a technical point of view, can it be crawled? Can it be indexed? Are there enough landing pages on the site? Is the quality of the content good enough? Good topical relevance? Think about EEAT, etc. And what about the user experience, the landing page experience, the user journey once people actually come onto the site? So we probably want to do a few audits: technical audit, keyword opportunities, content audit, competitor audit as a minimum, potentially some UX, CRO audits and so on as well. And then we can start putting the strategy together properly. So let's have a think about what timelines we have as a starting point, and everything else sort of has to fit into that really. Now there's no point doing all this great work, building a new site, getting lots of content live, and to reach our target of getting 50% more conversions if the money runs out, either for our budget or for the company a long time before that. Or it could be that actually it's just patience that runs out because people are expecting results sooner. So is SEO seen as a long-term investment? But how quickly results expected? And it might be that you are expected to get some results sooner, and you need to think about whether that's actually obtainable and start managing expectations if what you're being asked to do isn't going to be possible. But you have to obviously work within what you're expected to do. So think about what options you have. Do you focus on short-term stuff? Do you focus on long-term stuff? Or have you got the opportunity to get a balance and get some results straight away, but knowing that the big results will come later on from a sustained campaign? Make sure you're allowing for obviously any delays for the impact from when you actually do the work to when it's going to have that impact on your KPIs. But also consider visible impacts on the site that people see straight away, and people who don't really get SEO will just be like, oh, let's see, we've created lots of new categories. That looks fantastic. And other channels will benefit from that as well because you've got more landing pages. And of course, it will have an impact on SEO, and quite often that will be a quite quick, noticeable impact. Have a think about what's planned for above the line. What impact's that going to be? Will there be increases in brand search? Will it change how people search? Maybe the value of the ads isn't communicated that well by them alone. People are going to be interested to find out more. And so having the right landing pages available and showing for the right terms can help to support that. And sometimes there's ads that are just bad, and SEO can potentially help to rescue things.
Hello. We want you to remember our name, Outpost.com. That's why we've decided to fire gerbils out of this cannon through the O in Outpost. Cute little guy. Fire. And again. So close. Fire.
So I'm hoping the sound for that recorded properly. It may not have done. But that's an example of a very bad TV ad. Whether you think it's funny or not isn't really what's important. The biggest problem with it is the fact that it doesn't mention what the company actually do. And Outpost.com aren't in business anymore, you might not be surprised to hear. And maybe that TV advert is part of that. But what can SEO do to help mop up the mess from situations like that? That's maybe a bit of an extreme one. But yeah, think about what people are going to search for afterwards. You know, are people going to have questions? Even if people have a negative kind of opinion of an ad, they might be searching for things and discussing it online. And we need to think about what resources we have. We're going to have a certain amount of time, and we're going to have a certain amount of money or budget. At the end of the day, time equals money, so we can balance these things out. So we have a certain amount of dev time, a certain amount of time from start to finish, and of course a certain amount of time for content writers, copywriters, our SEO team, our own time. But we can save time by doing things like paying agencies, or we can get add-ons for a website rather than getting the devs to develop something from scratch. We could potentially pay for backlinks. I'm not saying if that's a good idea or not, but it can save time and money. And of course, there's various content and SEO tools that can be bought. And again, that includes AI tools. And I'm not going to say whether or not that's a good idea or not. There's lots of other people talking about that at Brighton SEO. So I'll leave that for another talk. But we may decide we need more resources than what's been given to us originally. So we need to potentially be building business cases, understanding the stakeholders' needs as well for that. What do they need to sign it off? Do they need a very detailed business case? Do they just need some top-level numbers? So we don't want to put too much work into that. But we might want to do these business cases before we get to the point where we actually present the strategy. So we've got a strategy based on a budget that's already approved. We need to think about how our users actually use search. Do they use search? In some cases, of course, we're going to have a business that's going after at least some people who don't really use search or don't use search to find the product that we're selling. But if they are, we need to think about whether they're actually going to use things like AI overviews, feature snippets, other SERPs features. So that will impact how important they are. Maybe people are time poor, in which case they're looking for a quick answer. Maybe they're risk averse, so trust is an important thing. We also need to think about the differences between different cohorts and demographics and different markets. So on the right here, just a very simplified kind of example of the differences in different markets. So younger users, desktop users, are likely to have more time available in general to find a solution when they search. And they're also likely to be more confident using different search features and more complex queries. So they will search in a different way to, for example, mobile users or people in markets with low internet penetration, or where the internet's not been available for very long, where maybe they're less au fait, maybe less confident using complex queries, and maybe also the types of features that get shown will vary by market too. This is my intent matrix. I'm not going to go through it all, but if you download the slides, you can see this and have a closer look. But everything is divided either in transactional or informational, and then it's got secondary intent categories, a bit more detail than what you might be used to seeing. And you can see I've got different types of pages that might be linked to, but also what you can do to enhance engagement on those type of pages and the type of terms they might be. So we need to know how people search, and we also need to know who our competitors are. Now, the obvious ones are our direct competitors. So if we're selling furniture, our competitors might be IKEA, Argos, etc. And of course, we need to identify who they are, and there might be some we're not that aware of, who maybe are big online but not so big offline, for example. We also need to know who our search competitors are, who aren't selling the same thing, but potentially going after the same keywords. So Carpetright may also have a blog where they go after interior design terms, House and Garden, Ideal Home Magazine. A lot of time we're going after the same content terms that we want to rank for. And then there's others as well. So these aren't really competitors, but we need to maybe include them within our competitor audits or in other auditing and planning. And they can give us some great ideas of what might work. So it could be retailers in other markets. So if we're selling furniture in the UK, we might look at Bed Bath & Beyond or Pottery Barn to see what they're doing in the US and elsewhere that we can maybe steal some ideas from. And also, we can look at companies with maybe a similar positioning but in a different vertical and see what's working well for them and use them as case studies. And then we can look at, for those competitors and those others, what is it that they are clearly doing badly. And there might be things that are a little bit hidden from us, but what we can clearly see from the website they're doing badly, and might give us some ideas of where we can get that competitive advantage. It could be missed opportunities, like they're only focusing on high search volume terms, they're not using experts, they're not looking at trending terms, maybe they're just looking at bottom of the funnel terms, they're not looking at upper funnel, mid funnel, or post-purchase loyalty driving terms. Could just be very poor quality content, topically unfocused. Maybe the content doesn't match the intent. Maybe the content's all out of date. Maybe they've only got one type of page. Or maybe it's a poor backlink profile. It could just be a very thin profile, no links at all. But it could also be something like it just looks unnatural. Maybe it's topically unfocused. They've got all sorts of links that doesn't make sense. There's nothing to do with what they actually do. Of course, we also want to look at what they're doing well. And a lot of these things are things that even when we are planning what our competitive advantage is going to be, we need to make sure we're also as good, if not better, at a lot of these things. Particularly things around site design, I'd say. So we want to make sure if our competitors all have very nice, accessible sites, easy to crawl, easy to navigate, very professional looking, fast and responsive, maybe have different sites set up for each market or each language, we need to do the same thing to be able to compete, really, even if we've got another competitive advantage on top of that, which we think is going to be key. Obviously, things like page optimization, length of content, matching intent, again, good mixture of types of content, use of multimedia and so on, optimizing for AIOs. And then working closely and working well with other channels like PR, paid, social, and so on. But copying tactics alone doesn't work. So if we take this example here, we've got a company coming in at the bottom where there's another company already pretty dominant in this market. And as time goes by, months and years, they're not really making much progress. The other company have a head start. They might have a higher budget. Users just don't shift if you're offering them the same thing. You have to have a significant competitive advantage to make them shift elsewhere. So over time, this company is not really making any progress at all. Then finally at the end here, maybe doing a little bit better. I don't know where it's hidden on this video, but maybe doing a little bit better, but not really making much progress. And I'll give you a second to guess who these companies might be before I reveal it. And you probably got it. It's Google and Bing. So don't be Bing. Nobody wants to be Bing. Their strategy seems to have been mainly to copy Google, sometimes do something very slightly different, but they never really stuck their necks out and tried something different, and therefore they've struggled, since they launched when it used to be live search. Don't copy another business, except you can copy tactics if you've got different competitors who are doing different things well. Well, you can do all of them well. So do all the things that all your different competitors are doing well to have that competitive advantage. That could work. Or compete on the topic or keyword level. Think about having different competitive advantages for different topics, for different keywords. Or it could be that you copy successful tactics from comparable sites in other countries who you're not actually competing with in search. It's important to understand the funnel and where people fit into it. If you understand the intent, then this will give you some idea where people are. Now, I think it's important to consider this, whether or not you agree that people genuinely actually use a funnel and actually shop in this way. Now, my opinion is that this is a good average, and a lot of people will shop this way. You maybe have heard people in other talks talk about the messy middle, and that's the idea that basically people maybe go up and down within these sections. But just to give you an overview, and I'm going to use an example actually of something that I'm shopping for at the moment. Skype is retiring, so I need to find a replacement. But back before I signed up for Skype, I was maybe aware of Skype and I was aware of other brands in that sort of space, but I didn't have a need for it. And then I had a trigger. My trigger for me was I needed a phone number that I could have and use anywhere in the world without having like exorbitant fees charged to me. So that was my trigger. So I was already aware of Skype and a couple of others, but I expanded out and I did a little bit of research to who else was in the market. And then I went through a period of active evaluation of understanding who the different options were and which ones were going to be best for me. And it might be that I at some point went back to expanding out my initial consideration set again. Sometimes that will happen because all the options that have gone into the active evaluation weren't suitable. And then I decided on Skype, got to my moment of decision, purchased a Skype subscription, which was a tiny bit fiddly at the time, so already getting a bad experience here. And then my post-purchase experience of actually using the product, of trying to find support through their website was awful. And in some ways it's a relief that they're retiring their service because I was ready to change anyway. I'd just been too busy. So that repurchase trigger could be that I'm fed up with the product. It could be that a subscription's run out. It could be that you've run out of washing powder and you need to go and buy some more. And then we think we're going to this loyalty loop. Now, ideally, we've had a great experience, or users have had a great experience with our business's product or service, and they're just happy to just go and buy again. So Disney Plus, when my subscription for Disney Plus runs out, I will just buy it again. Nice and simple decision. But for other things, I might go back to the active evaluation phase. I might be like, well, actually, that other company who I almost went with, maybe I'll have another look at them. Maybe I'll see if they got some better offers this time. Or I might go and just expand it out and start the whole kind of process again, pretty much. So what we can do with SEO is at this post-purchase experience point, we can drive loyalty by making it easier for people to find the content they're looking for, find guides and so on. But of course, SEO has a role to play all the way through, apart from maybe the purchase stage. And if you download these slides, there's an explanation there of each of these steps. So think about what you can actually rank for. Think about the domain authority you have and be honest about how that compares and how you're going to build that up over time, but how long that might take. The topical authority and relevance you have, so go after the right topics that you can actually rank for. Again, you might want to build it up for other topics, but that might take time. So think about what niches there are, what low competition keywords maybe, or relatively low competition keywords you can go after straight away. And make sure you are actually the right site for the intent. There's going to be some keywords that are very tempting, loads of search volume, sort of related to what you do, but the reality is that people are looking for an experience for do something that you just can't offer, and so just don't waste your time. Because we want to add value for users, as we said right back at the beginning. So if we just sell to the UK, we don't want somebody who's in the USA. If we know that our product's fairly premium, we probably don't want someone who's got cheap in their search term. We also need to make sure that we're finding users who add value for us. So people where maybe it's unclear what they actually want, or they're just doing research, maybe have less value, and we're at the very least going to prioritize, because we've got a finite amount of time, where we're going to prioritize the ones who we can see definitely are likely to be interested in our businesses, products and services. So now it's time to put our final definitive strategy together. So based on information gathering and everything, we need to choose what our objectives and focus actually are. And it could be a few of these, but is it building brand awareness? Is it getting users, getting us into the initial consideration set? Is it focused on that part of the funnel? Just building awareness of our offering, that it's a thing, so that kind of plays into that unconscious evaluation stage. Or are we focusing on those people who are pretty much ready to buy, particularly where they've decided to buy a particular product and then they're just deciding where to buy it from, maybe? Is it value communication? Or is it those post-purchase loyalty terms? Obviously, it might be a mixture of these things, but maybe there's some more of a focus, and maybe there's some that we know our business isn't really that interested in, and even though we could do them, we're not going to. So then we come to actually present our strategy. So potentially we've got a lot of different people, different levels of knowledge, so we need to pitch to the kind of final decision makers more than anyone, probably. And then we can fill in the gaps for the people who are actually going to be doing the work and are going to get the detail more later on. So we want to focus on outcomes for the business. For a start, it's going to give us more flexibility. What is the value of SEO going to be? Where's it going to fit into the marketing strategy? Where's it going to fit into the business strategy and help to provide those business objectives? May well want to include our strategy considerations in something like a SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. That can be quite a quick and easy way to show that we have thought through things without going into too much detail. The fact that there's thought behind what we've chosen we're going to do. And at this point, we want to give a sense of urgency. And you might be thinking, well, we don't want to do that, because if we give a sense of urgency, that puts more pressure on us to do work more quickly. But with SEO, partly because it's seen as long term, things can slip very easily. People think, okay, well, we're not going to get results, really for a year. So it doesn't really matter if I sign this off in a week's time, and then a week becomes a month. So you want to give that sense of urgency, like, okay, well, these competitors are doing these things now. This new opportunity is coming up now. We want to be first movers on this. And as part of that, obviously, you want to talk about timelines and what you're going to do and when, while giving yourself room for movement, of course. You may at this point also want to use case studies from other industries, from other markets, from competitors in other markets. And you might want to have your business cases that you put together at this point, or at least be ready to create them. And you don't want to be offering to create business cases that you don't really know how you're going to do, or even if you can do, because in some cases it is difficult to get the numbers or impossible. Think about how you're actually going to measure success and tell people at this point, including also when and what will you present back. Obviously, if you've got a 2-year strategy, you're hopefully going to get results before then. Are you going to come back in a quarter? Are you going to come back in a month? What's that going to look like? Okay, so we present this, but we want to keep flexibility. Now, it was Eisenhower who said no battle was ever won according to plan, but no battle was ever won without one. I always thought it was Napoleon, but I think it's just one of those things where everything gets attributed to him. It's a great quote, and it basically means that we have to have a plan to try and follow, but the reality is we need to be honest with ourselves, we're not going to. So we want to focus on outcomes more than tactics, at least with some stakeholders, because then when they come back, they're going to ask us how we're progressing towards those outcomes, not, oh, have you finished doing this, type of audit or this keyword research or whatever it might be yet. We need to be able to react to search engines, so have a plan B, tell people there's a plan B and a plan C, depending on what people in the market, what changes in the search landscape, competitors maybe launch a new website, for example. And we want to manage expectations as well at this point. So make sure it's clear that the targets and the results are dependent on getting the budget and resources we've requested. If they come back and say they're only giving us half the budget and resources, then we're not going to reach the same targets in the same amount of time. And of course, we've maybe got some idea what developers are going to need to work on as part of this, but until they actually look at it and come back and tell us how long it's going to take them, we can't necessarily predict that. So things might change if the devs come back and say, well, actually, this thing that you thought was going to be a 1 day kind of job to fix this, we need to actually do a whole new module or a whole new website even. Hopefully not. But we need to manage those expectations in case. And of course, progress is going to be relative to competitors. So if competitors suddenly double their efforts in SEO, start creating twice as much content, that's going to have an impact on what we're going to be able to achieve. And there might be different changes in the search landscape. And we can mention what we think might happen and what the result of that might be for our own results. So, time to make our strategy actually happen and get it rolled out and working. Hopefully everything's been signed off at this point. Of course, an important part of this is translating strategy into tactics. And of course, we're probably going to do this before we present the strategy. But really, it's the first step in getting the strategy underway. One way to think about it is, what does your target website, your target SEO look like? What is essential to achieve that? And are there different ways to achieve this, or at least parts of it? So, for example, it could be that there's some things you could fix from a technical point of view by getting some add-ons or trying to fix what's already there, but you could also go for a whole new website. And then we need to think about what's the most efficient way to reach our target. Most efficient in terms of time, but also budget. We also need to think about what's the lowest risk way to reach our target and to balance these things against each other. So it could be the most efficient way to reach our target is to get the devs to kind of jury rig and try and fix an issue with the existing website. But we know that actually that's risky because it might break again, or it might not quite work the way we want, or it might slow down the site. So maybe the lower risk version is to get a whole new website, even though that's going to cost a lot more. Or it could be that actually we just don't have the budget for that, or we know that our dev team will say that it's going to take 3 months and it's probably going to take a year. So that's high risk. So we need to balance these things out. We need to prioritize tactics, think about which of our resources are finite, balance impact, effort and urgency. Think about what's needed as a foundation for the site, indexability, crawlability, that kind of thing. And think about also what can be started on straight away, because if we're going to be busy doing all sorts of keyword research and so on, and technical audits, maybe there's an issue with the website we're already aware of, then we can talk to the devs straight away, and they can be working on that while we're working out what the next priorities are going to be, for example. Think about what looks good and what's visible, as mentioned, and obviously we need to think about the prerequisites and dependencies. So we might have our tasks in a spreadsheet like this, or we might have it in monday.com, something like that. And we got our costs, our times, who's going to be responsible, but also prerequisites. And so here you can see priority for the keyword research is higher than for the content audit, but it might decide that we need to do the content audit before we can start doing the keyword research. So making sure we get the order right, and then we can put things into a nice looking roadmap. This allows things to be arranged in a way that's quite easy for everyone to look at. We can adjust this and keep it flexible as well. It's one place for everyone to see what the plan is, even if they're not directly involved. And it can help show more senior people who aren't that involved just how complex and what the scope of what we're doing with SEO and content actually is. But we also might want something more like a project plan and more interactive, and that could be something like this in Excel, but it could also be something again like monday.com and other online services. With this, it makes it a lot easier to make sure we move things rather than just removing things when we change priorities, and we can use it to give people personal responsibility and get them to confirm they've seen what they're doing, when they're doing it, and accept that for themselves. We can work in downtime and delays, of course, that we know are going to happen, and we can also create copies and do one version based on best case scenario and one based on worst case scenario. That can be really useful too, and that can help highlight the things that are really crucial. And we're going to need to try and build a feedback loop, so we know what's working, what's not working, and including engagement metrics is important in that as kind of more classic metrics. If we're doing rank tracking, we should not really be focusing on individual keywords. Instead, we can group keywords together by intent, by topic, by cohort, etc. And that'll make it a lot easier to see what is and isn't working, and kind of drill down, maybe eliminate what isn't working, so we can focus on what is, or maybe go back and revisit and see why it's not working. And we might also want to keep an eye on what competitors are doing. Are they copying us? Are they going after the same keywords? But of course, we also want to just measure success overall to share with the company. So we need to make sure we've got accurate data tracking in place from the very beginning and check that it really is accurate. Make sure we've got the right attribution model, as mentioned, and measure things relative to what's going on in the industry, seasonality. Think about what upward and downwards trends there are in different areas, and think about other channels. Because it could be that we're seeing year on year SEO is down 5% for clicks or conversions, but actually other channels are down by more. Actually, other competitors are down by more because there's just less people searching and the market's shrunk. Try and talk to real clients, find out how they found you. Particularly business clients, big contracts. Do they use SEO? What was their user journey? Let's see what's working there. And make sure you think about how brand awareness can be measured. So there are more brand searches because people have found out about the brand through another search. Is there more footfall in store, and is there more direct traffic? Excellent. I've managed to do that in 69 minutes. So I hope that means when I go through, in real life, there will be enough time for a couple of questions. So if you have questions, though, do please get in contact. As you can see, different ways here on the slides. Although, to be honest, I don't really do Twitter, so Blue Sky's a better bet, or LinkedIn. So do connect with me. Thank you very much for listening.